Hello and welcome back. It's the House of Limericks. And today we've got another batch of limericks. We're talking literary limericks. I like literature. I like limericks about literature. So I wrote some limericks I want to share, and hopefully I can read them all nice and eloquently without getting tongue tied, because there's a couple tongue twisters in here. But that's all part of the fun, isn't it? So let's just dive right in. And before we dive in, I must mention a word from our sponsor, thekingoflimericks.com. Check it out. I got all kinds of limericks. I got a Amazon page with some of my books for sale, and you can check it out and show your support. I'd really appreciate it. So we're going to start off with a limerick about Fyodor Dostoevsky. There's a grandiose gambler who suffers from seizures. His opus consisted of several crowd pleasers, and painstaking students exhibit their prudence, dissecting his novels with scalpels and tweezers. That's kind of fun. So some of these limericks they go an extra foot in the meter on the lines 1, 2, and 5. So there's 4 accented syllables instead of 3 accented syllables. If you want to get technical about it, some people consider that a gross violation of traditional literary standards. But sometimes when you're talking Dostoevsky, you gotta be a little bit long-winded. It seems appropriate. And so sometimes my limericks do that because I have a lot to say. Other times I keep them kind of tight and in the more the traditional format. But either way, they're still limericks and they're fun. So here's one about Nathaniel Hawthorne, one of my favorites, the All-American author born on the 4th of July, sometime in the 19th century. It's The Birthmark, really great short story. Our accrued imperfections they serve to remind of the bodily limits by which we're defined, and so I surmise that you need not despise the ephemeral flaws of a natural kind. If you haven't read the story, I recommend it. If you haven't read it recently, I recommend revisiting it because it's a classic. It's a short classic with some heavy-handed symbolism, but it's highly allegorical, like most of his work. Another great American author who you probably remember from the 19th century, and that's Mark Twain, also known as Samuel Clemens. Huckleberry suffered with conscience. See, I got tongue twisted already. Huckleberry suffered with conscience conflicted. By law, his compassion was cruelly constricted. He helps his friend Jim, but the outlook is grim when angels and saints can be tried and convicted. A little bit of a moral quagmire in that novel, Huckleberry Finn, trying to do what's right, but has to break the law to do it because the law isn't right. And they use the N word a lot in that book, so it's kind of frowned upon, but it's a classic. I think Hemingway called it the quintessential great American novel, for whatever that's worth. I think Hemingway's fallen out of favor too. You notice I don't have any limericks about Hemingway. I do, but I'm not going to share them here because I don't think they're that great. No reflection on Mr. Hemingway. But here's one that no one can disagree about. George Orwell's 1984. The dystopian criminal Winston. He thought for himself for an instant. But for double on fun, it's to room 101, where his brain would be washed and then rinsed in. It's a disturbing novel that's as timely now as it ever was. And we got just a couple more here. This is a great science fiction and fantasy writer who you may know of. Where the land of Cthulhu existed, the creatures were horribly twisted. And as mythos grew bigger around this cult figure, the labor of Lovecraft persisted. H.P. Lovecraft. And one last, this isn't really literature, but he did a lot of writing. The Origin of the Species is his most famous work. And we're talking, yes, indeed, Charles Darwin. There once was a boat called the Beagle, embarked on a mission so regal, they found a solution that's called evolution, but in Kansas they call it illegal. Ba-dum-ts. Punchline now. There was the punchline. Hope you enjoyed that one. Hope you got some giggles and grins, and hope this inspired you to go visit your local library, check out some of these classic literary works. highly recommend the Brothers Karamazov. If you haven't read that one, it's a must read. And anything from Hawthorne, you can't really go wrong. Not sure if Mark Twain has really passed the test of time, stood up to the test of time, whatever people do to pass the test. But it definitely, he had a good turn of phrase here and there. So I hope you enjoyed that. Check out my website, kingoflimericks.com. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors, show your support. You can buy me a cup of coffee, a small donation to support independent poetry. And hope to see you next week. Thanks a lot.